Now, former SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane expected to cross-examine Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordan. This is later today at the State Capture Commission. Now, under his leadership at SARS, Moyane is accused of failing on governance issues at the tax agency. The Newzroom Commission, you'll remember that inquiry, it found that the governance weaknesses were made possible under Moyane's leadership. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Professor Keith Engel, CEO of the South African Institute for Tax Professionals. Prof, thank you very much for your time. I want to start off first with Edward Kisweta. He has been at the helm of the Revenue Service since May of 2019. Your assessment of his stewardship of the Revenue Service that far?
Look, I think he's been doing a lot. He's working very hard. I think most of the group is very, very happy with him. I'm hearing nothing but positive reviews. He's tried to reverse all the damage Moyane has done, but he doesn't want to just do that. He's trying to make the organization stronger than ever it was before. His biggest problem is it's got a big organization. It's very hard to move, and things move slowly. Yeah. But he's been moving slowly and steadily. So overall, I think he's doing the best anyone can do.
Prof, then let's talk about the issues that were raised by the Newzroom inquiry. And I want to talk specifically about one of the key findings that inquiry made. And it was that the existing SARS legislation simply gives too much power to the commissioner to a point where he basically is almost not answerable to anyone. Now, the question I have for you is that 4 years after the probe into these governance failures, in your view, has there been any effort to amend the SARS legislation?
I think there's some discussion around having a board for the commissioner to oversee him. But I don't really think that's the problem. I think the problem really is that the commissioner, this was done years ago, that the commissioner is appointed by the president. And then removing people is difficult. So if you want to remove somebody, they should be fired at will. And that the person who should be in control is the Minister of Finance. Now, the decision was that the commissioner should be appointed by the president because that's in line with other commissioners. But frankly, it doesn't make any sense. I think that the real issue is that the commissioner should be accountable to the Minister of Finance and removable by the Minister of Finance. That would be my best approach. Creating another board is like doing it with ESCOM. Boards are not effective accountability. And really the problem is it's too hard to get rid of upper middle level management. So it's not just a commissioner issue. It's also deep in SARS and other government departments where you can't eliminate political people or people who are really at a high level management without a whole hearing. That's not the way you operate. You need to be able to say, look, you're gone. And that's the end of it. And that's the better way to go. And then the only other issue would be for accountability is making sure there's better parliamentary oversight and that they have more say.
Yeah. It's interesting, Prof, you speak about a board, and clearly you are not in favor of such. The other interesting element which ties in with what you are talking about were the recommendations that perhaps an appointment of a deputy SARS commissioner would probably be one of the mechanisms to try and provide oversight on the work of the commissioner, or possibly an advisory executive committee, or better yet, an inspector general who would try and make sure that they restrain the power of the commissioner. Your thoughts on those specific recommendations which were made by the Newzroom inquiry?
See, the problem that you have is if your executive is corrupt, what do you do? I mean, that's really what the problem is. You need your executive. Now you've got a good person there. That person's got to get work done. Now, if you suddenly say that they can't get work done and they have to go through all these processes, you're slowing them down. And that's why I think it's a set of wrong accountability. More boards, more governance. I mean, maybe you have an inspector general. We do have an inspector general. Maybe you have a outside report once a year might be useful. So yes, that might be good. But to tie up the commissioner and not allow him to do his job, I think you just bog everything down. And what happens is you find that the good people get bogged down and the criminals do what they do anyway. I mean, there were some structures there. The problem with Moyane was he then created these ridiculous appointments. So part of the problem was his ability to appoint people with no experience.
Yeah.
So this was one of the major issues. If you look at that executive board, none of those people had serious tax experience. I met them. They were, maybe nice people, but, the communications officer. I mean, and all those people had no experience whatsoever. And what you did is he allowed him to bring in friends. And then he started to restructure the place. And you need to restructure the place. But he restructured the place with bad intent. So my feeling is that what you really need is a good, maybe oversight in the sense of giving a report. But then you need to give the minister the power to fire. And that's it, without having to go through endless processes and whatever. And by just creating boards on boards, then they also start becoming corrupt. I don't think that really helps.
Yeah. On the back of the problems at SARS, Professor Engel, the tax morality issue, it suffered a lot, and this we were told by the authorities that South Africans simply were not keen to pay their taxes. Since Moyane's departure, how would you assess the whole issue around tax morality?
Okay, well, I think there's a number of issues. I think one, when they talk about tax morality, when the rates become very high, in which they are now, you will find more resistance because people are actually under stress and they go, look, I can't afford it. So when they're trying to maintain their lifestyle, if you find that the tax starts to undermine your lifestyle, you can tell you whatever you want, but people will be more difficult. So the only way to get them in line is to make sure there's fear, but proper level of fear. So if you have an organization that becomes ineffective, then people know they can get away with it. The second problem that was happening under Moyane was that, well, again, it wasn't just Moyane, it was Zuma. So people saw, well, forget SARS. I mean, SARS can be as moral as it wants to be, but government itself is corrupt. Then the next level becomes the problem that SARS itself was corrupt. And what you found that what Moyane was doing was he was going after soft, easy, mostly compliant people doing shakedowns, and then he was totally ignoring the issue of evasion. So one thing that Keith has been very good is he's picking up some of the tenderpreneurs. He's trying to get some of them. He's been getting customs abuses. He's trying to hit the outright illegal. So what the public began to see was if you were wholly illegal and wholly corrupt, you were protected. SARS was targeting the guys who were mostly compliant. SARS itself was corrupt. The regime was corrupt. So, yes, I think there was a damage on tax morality. But I think tax morality is a complicated thing. The fact is, if you pick up SARS and make them better, well, it'll help to an extent. But when it comes to the morality issue, it's more than that. You've got to have faith in government overall. SARS can only do so much.
Professor Keith Engel, thank you very much for your time, CEO of the South African Institute